In the last video, I programmed up a part using key switching by assigning notes in key select mode. I just want to draw your attention to this articulation called X notes. It's very cool. What it is fret noises of muted strings when you're hitting the strings on a bass with no actual note being pressed. Let me play you a little bit of the arrangement I did. I continued what I did last video and I put in some X notes. So good for funky breakdowns. Now we can reorder the parts here by dragging and dropping them around just like that, and they'll replace what's in the spot that's already there when we drag it to it. So by reordering this around, we're not actually changing the part assignment in the actual, let's say in the mixer mode. All the parts are still on the signs are assigned to the same parts rather. But what happens is the assignments of the MIDI notes for the key select remain per slot. So the sounds are not tied to the slot, they're tied to the part. This doesn't have to be part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They can be mixed up in any order, but the key select notes are tied to the slots. So right now, by dragging these around, I've messed up what I've done. Like, for example, if I do that, we'll hear staccato articulations in place of those X notes for that part I just programmed up. So that's the way it works with moving parts around. Now, in addition to using the mouse or key switching like we've just done, we can also use MIDI CCs or program changes to call up the different parts in live mode. And these work more or less the same way. We have the show modes here for MIDI CC, and again, there's none assigned now, but you right-click and assign it the same way, CC Learn Inverted or CC Learn. So same thing, you can do the inverted trick that we did for the key selecting that I just did in the last video. And similarly for program change, you can learn by right-clicking and selecting the Learn Program Change here. Now, when you're doing that, the modes also apply, and you can set them in the settings mode here. We have for MIDI CC mode the same 3 settings, switch, touch, and latch. And for program change mode, we have the option to select which type of table of program changes your device responds to. Some are mapped from 1 to 128 versus 0 to 127, or some older synth modules 11 to 88 in several banks. So we can set that. And as well for the key select range, we can toggle between C3 as note number 60 or C4 as note number 60. So just some display preferences. And we can selectively turn each of these modes on or off for having Trillian respond to key switches, program change, or MIDI control change messages. Now, rounding out our look here, we have what's called dual live mode. You'll recall that I said that in live mode, the MIDI channel is overridden and it'll respond to any MIDI channel. Well, when you're in live mode, you get to it with this icon. What you're doing is you're splitting up, let me close the zoom here, you're splitting up live mode into 2 parts, 1 to 4 over here and 5 to 8 over here, so you can have 2 players at the same time, each accessing the banks of 4. You can still drag and drop parts around, but you'll notice these are colored white and these are colored uniquely. We also have duplicate arrows here, 1 for each of the banks. So when we're in this dual live mode, in the settings page, all these settings get duplicated, and here you would want to set a unique MIDI channel separate for each of the 2 parts so that Trillian knows which channel to assign to which parts. I'm going to switch projects now, and we're going to look at latch and trigger modes. I've created a different multi here with a bunch of arpeggiated sounds loaded into each of the 8 parts. Now we turn latch mode on here, and with latch mode, which we can selectively enable or disable with this L button for each of the 8 parts, basically it allows you to toggle a note on and off. So basically, when you have latch on, the note will stay sustained until you hit it again. For example, with latch off, keep an eye on the keyboard down here and you can see how and what I'm triggering. Here, I take my note off, or my finger off the note rather, and the sound stops. With latch mode, it'll continue until I hit it again. So you can create a real multi-layered, multi-textured performance in real time by doing this on several parts on and off. And what ties in with this type of rhythmic material are the trigger modes. We have this little I button, so we can set how we want these sounds triggered. When you click hold here, you get a menu, and we can trigger it immediately as soon as the note is pressed, or on the next 16th note, next beat, or next bar. So let's set some different trigger modes for some of these. And I'm just sort of setting them at random here. They'll all work. And what that'll do is create some nice syncopations by starting them. Well, for sure they'll start in sync, but they'll start on different beats and different 16th notes, which might generate some interesting patterns. So let's try this, and as we're going, sometimes you build up an accumulation of notes and you're not sure what to stop and what to start and what's going. And we have sort of an all notes off panic button here. This little button here will disable everything playing at once. So let's see what I can come up with. This is so much fun, I don't want to stop. So you can see how you can generate some really interesting patterns like that. And it's important to be aware that when you disable the latch view like that, you're not really turning it off. They're still going to respond to the latch and trigger modes. It's just a view mode. You're going back to regular live mode view here. Versus that, it'll retain all the settings that you have. And these are available also in stack mode. And that's where we're going to end here, and we're going to pick up in the next video and start looking at stack mode, the other way of working multitembrally in Trillion.